Hello, all Alcona athletic coaches. Obviously, we're doing a little bit of a different coaches meeting this summer due to some personal issues that I had that came up earlier this week. I apologize for that, but want to get this information to you, and I hate to try to rally everybody in and not be 100% sure if people can make it. So I'm going to try to bust through some different pieces of information. I'm also going to reshare the Google Drive folder with all the documents as well as anything else you might need as an athletic coach. And as always, I'm here for the most part for the whole month of August, also accessible via email. So we'll work through it if you have any questions along the way. So first thing I wanted to stress is athletic department. One of the things I was going to do when we sat down and met for the coaches meeting was going to be, we don't know what we don't know. So if there's an issue or a problem within your team or your sport, a need that you might have that you think we can help with, try to let us know. The worst thing we can do is say we can't help that situation, but in most cases, we want to help. We want to try to assist and support you guys. So, we pretty much are out of the way and you guys can work with kids and teach them. So one good example of that would be I think in one of the locker rooms a few years ago, there was a stall that was not on, didn't know about it, was a frustration, for the coaches and the players, and once we found out, we fixed it. So that's a small example, but if there's things that are going on that are frustrating you, over-communicate if you need to. I'll try to do my best to help alleviate the situation myself or Mrs. Bice. So without further ado, we'll go into some other pieces here. Last year, the MHSAA required all head coaches to be CPR certified and AED certified. All head coaches last year received that certification. It's a 2-year certification. So I have one new head coach this year, which is Brianna Griffith, and she will be coaching cross country, and Abby Simotis, who was a head coach last year, will be just assisting her. So Brianna will need CPR certification. We'll work on that before the season begins. We do not have any other new coaches, so we'll have to get everybody else recertified next summer. We will plan that out when we get to that point. One thing, as of July 31st forward, the state of Michigan has coaches advancement courses to help train coaches a little bit more in the act of coaching. They are now going to require that starting effective August 1st for any new coaches hired at that point onward. In order to be able to coach varsity, you have to complete those courses. So, sometimes if things change and you haven't been a previous varsity coach either at Alcona or another school, you will have to go through the coursework. And that could be online. It might be hosted at a regional site, but they're just trying to do a little bit more in educating coaches and giving them some background on some more global larger issues to better inform you. So again, the CPR, the AED, and the CAP would be effective CAP August 1st for new coaches. CPR and AED, we just have to have the head coach of each sport certified. The assistants must all have a background check, have an emergency card on file, which we do have in the office, and a volunteer application. You have to do that every year. I apologize, for the tediousness of that aspect. And all the assistant coaches, too, much like the varsity coaches, have to go through a concussion training. The MHSAA's rules meeting for each sport encompasses the concussion training within it. So obviously one recommendation that I've made in the past few years is for you to take the rules meeting as an entire coaching staff rather than individually. It will allow you to satisfy the concussion requirement altogether. So just something to keep in mind. Again, try to rally everybody up before the season. You take the meeting with one computer on a projector and then have everyone sign the certificate once it's finished, and we'll put that on file. And that would satisfy the concussion training. If you decide not to go that route, then you have to let me know, and I will hook up all assistant coaches with concussion training online. Want to transition into some school updates. At the high school, we have Connor Hubbard, who will be a new teacher. He's an Alcona alumni. He will take back over the agri-science program. When Mr. Matchett left a number of years ago, Mrs. Reed stepped in, did an amazing job. But we wanted to reinstall it back to full-time. Connor and several other highly qualified candidates applied, but kind of really stood out. So we're excited to have that program back full-time and even have that worked into the middle school schedule a little bit as well. U.S. News and World Report, we kind of, awards don't drive us, but it's a nice thing to be recognized. U.S. News and World Report recognized us for the 3rd straight year and the 6th time in 10 years as one of the top 30% of high schools and schools in the country. So great thing. We also like to toot our horn a little bit. Our graduation rates have been rising. We're well above the state average. Last year we were at 92%. That's the highest rate within the 3 counties surrounding us. So we're really proud about that. A lot of people working their butts off trying to assist students in a lot of different ways. So, you should feel very proud to be a part of the Alcona Tiger family, and each of you are just as much of a part of that in the roles that you play with the student athletes, helping them gain confidence to perform in the classroom as well. We also are sprinkling back in a band program this year. Again, several years ago there was with enrollment decline and some other things, we lost some numbers, so we were not able to continue the band program. We're going to try it 6th and 7th grade part-time this year and hopefully continue to be able to build it back in if there's the interest there. In your Google Drive folder, which I'm going to reshare with you in a bit, you have district calendar, which will look something like this. If I had enough time, I'd screen share right now, but pretty much it has every important date for the entire school year, whether that's exams, early release Fridays, first day of school, which by the way is September 6th. A lot of different components on this, so if you want a lot of information about what the school calendar looks like for managing your practices or whatever the case might be, this will be in your Google Drive folder. Another thing I'm going to add into your folder as well is the bell schedule. Last year we went from, we started at 8:15 and we went till 3:25 Monday through Friday. This year it will be 8:05 to 3:15. And on early release Fridays, and you'll have to look at the master calendar to sync that, will be 8:05 to 1:45. So just kind of be thinking about what your practices might look like, departure to games, different pieces along your teams, but just to let you know our start and end times. Okay, so without further ado, I guess we'll go into some other documents here. In the Google Drive, you have a student code of conduct and an athletic handbook. That's a great way to revise, the policies that you are, expected to carry out as a coach or head coach. Just a good way to brief yourself on some different things. That has everything in that, is from who to report your scores to requesting payment procedures and credit card procedures, to our policies for 6th grade participation, athletic fees. The whole gamut is involved there. So just take a peek at that when you can. I'm going to touch on a few changes with that in just a little bit. Medical kit communication. Mrs. Bice is working on restocking the medical closet down in the cage area in the new gym. So if you need something, you just got to communicate to Mrs. Bice and we'll pretty much get it ordered. She's also working on catching up we're going to maintenance the AEDs to make sure they're working properly for the school year, and again work out a agreement between cross and soccer and football and volleyball, trying to determine who's going to have those and when and where. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm going to share out the Google Drive folder with you again. All head coaches has access to that last year. That has a ton of documents in it, pretty much anything you need. And if you think you need something else, just let me know, and I will add that into the folder so you have it accessible at all times. Again, just let me know if you're having trouble accessing that or what the issue might be, but that has a word request forms, the handbook, the code of conduct, request for payment, the bell schedule, master calendar, emergency cards for your coaching staff, background check paperwork, lots of different pieces in that folder at your fingertips at any point. One thing to touch on a little bit with the Google Drive folder, or Google Drive in general, is the moment you get in your rosters, even if they're a rough draft roster, you can email it to Mrs. Cordes, and that's CORDESK at alconaschools.net. She is our new 712 building secretary, taking over from Mrs. Kelly. Mrs. Kelly isn't gone. She's just down in the district office now as a business secretary down there. So Mrs. Cordes will be the person you go to for all eligibility concerns, physicals, code of conducts, all this type of information. She will be maintaining each roster spreadsheet, so you can check that, see what athletes have what information in, and be able to monitor it and go from there. So another thing to touch on a little bit, if you're trying to make an announcement to your team, it's towards the end of the day, you can email Mrs. Cordes at that same email address I mentioned. We will try to get it either over the PA. We also have daily announcements before school. Mr. Suttle and a few other students are going to run that this year for us. So there's things that you want to be included in those announcements. You're going to want to email Mrs. Cordes or maybe even myself, and we should be able to get it printed and inserted into the announcement pool. And if you ever needed to post sign-ups for your athletes, you can also put those right on the high school window or email Mrs. Cordes, and she can stick it up and be ready to go for any students that are going to be walking by. We are going to shoot for team pictures on August 19th. That's very tentative at this point. Obviously not a schedule developed yet, but we're working with the photographer to schedule team photos on August 19th. I will keep you posted as we get a little bit closer to that date and let you know what our final schedule looks like. We're going to go into a few different changes, I guess, or modifications heading into this year. One thing, I'm going to have to reach across over here, that we've been working on for a few years that I think I'm going to talk to the Board of Education about in a week or so, is a dual sport policy at Alcona Community Schools. This year, our MHSA enrollment is 245. We should stabilize in the next few years right around 230, I think, for quite some time. Most of our classes are between 50 and 60, just depending on the class. And in order to better compete, across the board in a lot of athletic avenues, one recommendation that I have is to really consider a dual sport policy or a dual sport program. I have a sheet that is going to be in the Google Drive folder that lists out kind of what it's going to look like to be a dual sport athlete at Alcona. It lists some basic information about the program. Student fills out paper, takes it to coach 1, coach 2, declares primary sport, secondary sport, and then the coaches get together with the AD, the student, and the parents and try to determine a plan to successfully navigate through the season. All the parties have to be in agreement of the plan, otherwise the athlete will not be allowed to participate in dual sports. So again, I really believe that this is only going to happen in a few instances, and obviously that team of people have to get together to decide if it's best for both programs and that athlete as well. But with our shrinking enrollment, wanting to still compete, as well as offering opportunities for students, I think it's an option that should be on the table and available, and then up to the individual groups to be able to make that decision. So I will keep you posted on the progress of that and kind of how the board is feeling about that as well, and we can go from there. So take a look at that document if you get a chance. Feel free to provide some feedback if you have any questions or concerns about it. Sixth grade participation is something new that the MHSA had been considering for a few years and trying to support smaller schools as well as middle schools that were 6-8 for grade levels, and sixth graders are kind of not allowed to participate in MHSA sponsored activities. So what we're trying to navigate right now is balancing the interest of sixth graders with what our numbers look like in 7th and 8th grade. So in the handbook, and again, that's in the Google Doc, I have some recommended team numbers there. So if the volleyball or boys and girls basketball do not meet a recommended number of athletes, let's say, then we will open it up for sixth graders. And at that point, more than that, we'll try to allow as many sixth graders that want to participate as possible. We really don't want to cut athletes at that point. Track and cross country at the middle school level, the more the merrier. But at this point, we really want to be careful of opening the floodgates and having too many athletes on a team, but also, honoring the 7th and 8th graders that have made the commitment to that sport thus far and allow them the opportunity to develop without too many athletes being involved in that program. So that's on page 8. So if you want to take a look at the athletic code of conduct, or not code of conduct, but the handbook, page 8 will have some information about sixth grade participation. Want to touch on a piece in the student code of conduct that changed to add some clarification in this document. So there was an issue this summer during a summer athletic activity where a student a few students had an issue, and I wanted to go into the code of conduct and make sure there was some clarity there, in case there was a situation that arose in the future during this time. In our student handbook, our school handbook, it talks about whether it's in June or January or whatever time of year, whether you're in sport or out of sport, if it happens in athletic activity, you can take consequences. But it wanted to clarify that, I guess, more in the code of conduct. So I added a paragraph to the violation piece of the conduct that says, if a violation occurs during an off-season workout or summer activity, consequences may be assigned to the athlete immediately depending on the activity or type of event. This could be a substitution of the 20% suspension requirement if the activity is deemed to be competitive in nature and the most immediate of what an activity an athlete is currently participating in. So what that means is, if we're in the midst of a number of basketball scrimmages or volleyball scrimmages or 7-on-7s, and there's an issue, we could deem that the 20% suspension could actually take place during the summer. So just a piece in there to try to clarify expectations. Again, we're still under the whole premise that 3 strikes and you're out. So if you serve 2 20% suspensions, or actually a 20 and a 40, then that's the end of your athletic career. So if you would have a 3rd strike. So it would be good to review the student code of conduct, and I'm glad to take some feedback on this as well, because it's a little bit of unknown. I was talking to some other schools that didn't anything like this necessarily pop up, so we're unique, not in the way we want to be, but we have to address it and be ready to handle it just in case another situation pops up. So let me know if you have any questions about the modifications of the violations, and especially when it's out of season. Athletic transportation. So on a positive note, the game plan heading into the school year is to bring back athletic transportation. That means busing for all activities. Our concern right now is making sure we have enough bus drivers, which at this point we do. So substitute bus drivers are probably the biggest concern. So in the next 2 weeks, you're going to get a document or updated schedule that will have departure times listed on that schedule, and obviously the bus will be here in front of the building. At this point, we're planning on having it go to the game and stay to the game. We might alter that throughout the season depending on the feedback that you give to us. We don't need a bus ride home or whatever the case might be, but for now we're going to plan on go, stay for the game, come back. The only thing that we're going to not provide transportation for is going to be Saturday events. So, and obviously some really small sport teams that don't have many athletes, we're going to have to really consider situation by situation if we're going to be able to allow that. But Saturday events for sure, you're on your own. So if you have a Saturday softball, baseball, volleyball tournament, bowling match, there will not be a bus provided for those events. I want to transition to communication a little bit. So Mrs. Weiss, in charge of many of the same things she was last year. Once you finish your award request, which is in the Google Drive folder, questions about officials or last-minute changes about games, cancellations, questions about game managing, medical supplies, or ticket takers, she's your lady. Business office, Mrs. Kelly will eventually have all the credit cards down in the business office, as well as be booking rooms in different places in the district facility use-wise. So if you need either of those 2 aspects, you need a credit card, school credit card, she'll be the person you see about that, as well as trying to, if you're going to have your banquet and you want to check and see if the cafeteria is available, she'll be the person to go to. Shelly Hoffmeyer, again, is going to help us with concessions. Just as it was last year, each sport has the opportunity to take their own sport, and then once they don't do that, then we'll throw it out there for other groups to be able to take advantage of. Mrs. Cordis in the office will handle rosters, so when you have your completed season roster, you'll get it to her. Different forms, eligibility, medical cards, physicals, deposits, and withdrawals. She'll be able to help you with all those pieces. One thing I was able to add new this year, this is a big perk. So you in each athletic, we have a copy code. So back in the copy room, if you're here, Mrs. Cordis and myself can help you understand how to use the copier, but you need a code to get it started. So if you need to make copies for practice or parent night or a fundraiser, we have a copy code the code is 158. So if you have questions about how to operate the copy machine, let me know and I will do my best to help out and get us on the right track. That's my agenda that I had for the coaches meeting. So I know video isn't the most ideal way to do this, but I at least wanted to get the information to you. You're going to have to do some independent reading, obviously, with the handbook and the student code of conduct. I want you to look at the dual sport policy if you can, and give me some feedback on that. Obviously, stay on top of your coaching staff. Prior to the season, be better than not. Get background checks, emergency cards, volunteer applications all filled out for anyone that's going to be helping you coach. The rule of thumb that I kind of use is anyone that is going to be around for more than 3 or 4 practices for the year, they need to be background checked and go from there. Occasionally we'll have a guest in the practice, or another set of eyes to watch an activity, or a piece of your game plan, just to get some feedback. That's okay, but if it becomes a regular thing, we're going to want to get them background checked. That's a state law. It's a rule. It's not necessarily a local rule. We will pay for the background check, especially if it's a regular participator in practice. So again, other than that, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You have my contact information, email, phone number. I'll be around the month of August. I'll try to stop into all the fall practices along the way and try to see if everyone's doing okay. And Mrs. Bice is going to be working on the medical kits to make sure they're ready to go for your first practice as well. We have our dead week that's going to be starting next week, and the gyms are still closed for another week as well as they continue to finalize the wax and some different things along that line. So hope all is well. Have a great weekend and a great rest of your summer, and good luck to all the fall coaches as they get ready to dive in here in about 7 to 10 days. Take care.